Black Hills, 1876. Secret plots ignite Custer's downfall at Little Bighorn. Full documentary. A disaster. A slaughter. George Crook's failed winter campaign didn't crush the Lakota, it united them. By June 1876, 7,000 native warriors waited as Custer, desperate for political fame, split his forces. His last words? "Hurrah, boys! We've got them!" Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories. But first, what did Custer's own men whisper as the arrows rained down? In 1876, heavy snow and strong winds hit the grasslands, stinging the faces of soldiers as they huddled around their campfires, which struggled to stay lit in the storm. Colonel John Gibbon bends over a worn diary, his breath visible as he growls to a lieutenant. "Met a man who despises Indians more than snakes, claims a good one's only good deceased." His pencil scores the page, the lead scraping against the moist paper. "Frenzied canines, not combatants," he retorts. In grimy Missouri saloons, men pound fists on tables, cursing about red heathens. At Fort Abraham Lincoln, soldiers scuff the ground and chuckle, wagering on how quickly the primitives will flee. The Lakota, the Cheyenne, they're subhuman to these individuals, a pestilence to be eliminated. However, that disdain clouds their judgment, muffles the far-off beat of war drums, increasing in volume each night. The Black Hills rise, ominous and uneven, pine branches cracking under accumulating snow. Gold deposits throb beneath the icy soil. Prospectors discovered them in August 1874, and the news spread through Washington, D.C. like wildfire. Ulysses S. Grant sits in a leather armchair, cigar firmly held in his teeth, the atmosphere heavy with smoke and perspiration. He strikes the table with his fist, the impact shaking a whiskey tumbler. "We're seizing it," he barks to his confidants, "and nobody is to know how." Pens glide across parchment, ink spreading as they outline the scheme, invalidate the 1868 agreement, unleash the homesteaders, and let the Lakota suffer the consequences. January 3, 1876. Zachariah Chandler, Secretary of the Interior, pens the directive in his workspace. Gas lamps glowing. "To the reservations by the 30 honest," he murmurs to an assistant, lips twisting, "or we declare it war." Outside, tempests rage, wind howling through the plains, accumulating snowdrifts 6 feet high. Families are immobilized, horses struggle, infants succumb to the cold. Chandler is aware, rearranges his documents, and anticipates. Philip Sheridan reclines in a rickety chair at Fort Laramie, boots resting on a container, the acrid smell of wet wool and stale tobacco permeating his discolored blue uniform. He's incinerated Georgia homesteads in 64 expanses of fire and wails, and now he'll inflict worse. Press them relentlessly, he commands his officers, voice sharp, until they collapse and surrender. His subordinate acknowledges, jotting down the instruction: no patrols to intercept the encroaching settlers. By February, the hills are overrun. Individuals in frayed attire wield axes, metal striking into tree trunks with heavy sounds. Picks dig into the soil, earth fragmenting, gold particles tinting their fingers. Women haul containers, footwear submerging in the mire. The Lakota observe from elevated positions, composed, their exhalations visible in the frigid air, eyes monitoring each action. A warrior strengthens his hold on a spear, knuckles turning pale. Then the deception surfaces. E.C. Watkins, a slender Indian Affairs agent, is hunched over in a crammed workspace. November 1875. His attire is worn, his fingers smudged with ink as he drafts a dispatch. Sitting Bull's factions marauding, slaying whites, creating mayhem. He composes, the pen tip scratching against the surface. He hesitates, smirks inwardly. This will suffice, and marks the document. No charred residences, no scalped victims, only fabrication, smooth as silk. The report reaches the newspapers on December 3. The New York Herald proclaims hostile Sioux on the warpath. Farmers in Ohio grip rifles. Children in Boston speak of savage Native Americans. Historians now examine the records, perusing aged documents. Where's the substantiation? An expired bovine here, a vanished steed there. Nothing corroborates Watkins' narrative. He remains unfazed, merely ignites a cigar and relaxes. Gold outweighs truth. Grant's apparatus operates Chandler, Sheridan, Watkins, a triad of components advancing toward domination. They presume it's simple. Antagonize the Lakota, observe them react violently, then advance with cavalry swords gleaming. Sheridan brags over liquor. They'll disperse by springtime. But the plains reveal a contrasting narrative. Hooves beat the snow, a consistent cadence, 2,000 Lakota, 1,000 Cheyenne, 500 Arapaho, numbers increasing constantly. Campfires illuminate the expanse, smoke ascending into the overcast sky, the sound of igniting wood mingling with hushed melodies. Women mend animal skins, men hone arrows, metal grating against rock. The U.S. anticipates uncivilized people who will retreat at the initial cannon discharge. Instead, they solidify into a barrier structured, resolute. Chandler's ultimatum expires in the snow, January 31, concluding without capitulations. Sheridan's scouts return, their expressions ashen, whispering. Excessive numbers, far too many. Grant's chart rests on his desk, borders bending, marked with tobacco stains. He outlines the hills with a digit. Initially grinning now, his expression hardens. The scheme is failing. Agitation doesn't fracture the tribes, it consolidates them. Prejudice impairs the army, labeling them savages. Isn't merely animosity, it's a disastrous error in judgment. They fail to perceive the tactics within those encampments, the composure in those gazes. This isn't a minor undertaking any longer, it's a lit fuse, emitting sparks. Custer's spurs chime as he prepares to ride, unmindful, prepared to detonate the situation. At Fort Ellis in Montana, John Gibbon paces the wooden veranda, his footwear thudding on the timbers, until they protest. He's the commanding officer here, a slender individual with a beard showing signs of age. And he's agitated, composing correspondence for the Army and Navy Journal between training exercises. Pen scraping late into March 1876. He peers at the mountains, murmuring to a subordinate, "This territory belongs to them, why are we sacrificing for it?" He's not lenient, his grasp on a firearm is unyielding, but he recognizes the corruption. Homesteaders partitioning hallowed land, directives from Washington reeking of duplicity. By May, he's advancing eastward from Montana, 400 soldiers following him, a component of the three-way assault converging on the Lakota. His stomach churns, but he continues marching. Philip Sheridan remains seated heavily at Army headquarters in Chicago, his chair protesting under his weight. April 1876, he's unshaven, his attire disheveled, the atmosphere tainted with cigar butts and stale coffee. His workstation is a war zone charts, secured with pushpins, dispatches piled haphazardly. He's the general of the army. 45, and his tone is piercing as he inclines forward, snapping at his aide, "I need Terry advancing. Gibbon advancing, subdue them prior to summer." He's not strategizing now, he's applying pressure, monitoring troop movements, insisting on haste. His Civil War tactics incinerate, deprive, obliterate, dictate every command. He grins, driving a pin into the Little Bighorn vicinity. "They're finished," he whispers. He's mistaken. This is the battle they didn't anticipate, the resistance they didn't respect. The Little Bighorn is waiting, and the warriors are ready. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories. The storm is just beginning. George Crook struggles through Wyoming mire. March 17, 1876. His operation a disaster. She's 200 miles distant, traversing Fort Lincoln. Viscera agitated. Firearms discharge, fumes irritate the air, but the Cheyenne dissipate into the mountains. His offensive is unsuccessful. Equines hobble, suffering from frostbite, and supply vehicles are submerged to their axles in mud. He strikes a container near a diminishing fire, growling to a scout. Remain silent. Terry receives no information. He omits reporting the defeat, rendering Gibbon and Terry uninformed. That oversight has repercussions. 300 Cheyenne survivors proceed northward, uniting with Crazy Horse, augmenting the numbers at Little Bighorn. Crook's negligence doesn't merely miss a chance, it amasses a force. George Armstrong Custer parades across Fort Lincoln's training area, May 15, 1876. Spurs clinking, golden hair flowing in the Dakota breeze. He's 36, the 7th Cavalry's acclaimed figure, and impatient his lodging is strewn with investment documents. Failed railway speculations that depleted his finances. He strides, striking a message against his leg, grinning at Libby, a single major victory, and I'll be New York's next sovereign. The election is approaching November 8, and he envisions a Senate position, perhaps greater, if he can impress the media. He trains his 600 soldiers, swords glistening, commanding. We'll penetrate them effortlessly. His pencil scores the page, the lead scraping against the moist paper. Frenzied canines, not combatants, he retorts. His gaze sparkles, oblivious to the actual numbers. Sitting Bull prostrates himself in a parched ravine near the Rosebud, June 5, 1876. Sediment coating his plaits. He's 45, Hunkpapa Lakota, robust, lacerations marking his arms from the Sundance ritual. A blade glints, 100 incisions, blood flowing down his forearms, accumulating on the ground as two. Oh, observe, holding their breath. Drums pulse, profound and consistent, membranes stretched beneath forceful strikes. He falters, perception clouding troopers collapsing, equines wailing, then rises, voice strained. Wakantanka has delivered our adversaries to us. Acclamations burst forth, a resounding wave. His settlement extends 3 miles alongside the Little Bighorn, 1,500 dwellings, smoke ascending thickly, horses neighing in enclosures. He traverses it, unhurried, purposeful, conferring with Cheyenne representatives, delineating combat strategies with a twig. We assault collectively, he instructs a messenger. Gaze resolute. He's not a visionary, he enumerates warriors, 2,500 in total, monitors army dust plumes, consolidates Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho into a unified weapon. His dwelling serves as a command center, voices hushed, strategies precise. Crazy Horse patrols the settlement's perimeter, reins relaxed, his painted pony stirring up dust. In his mid-30s, Oglala Lakota, he's lean, sharp-featured, a worn garment draped loosely over his physique. June 17, he's at Rosebud Creek, 700 combatants, accompanying him, attacking Crook's formation. Hooves vibrate the earth, projectiles whiz. His battle cry pierces the atmosphere. Hokahay. Crook's soldiers disperse, firearms abandoned in the undergrowth. He maneuvers his steed, composed, guiding riders with an uplifted hand. Back at the encampment, he genuflects by a blaze, dividing a portion of venison with a youngster, murmuring. Consume this winter is severe, a Cheyenne elder acknowledges afterward. Aggressive like a predator, gentle like a sibling. His assessment is somber, 800 warriors under his authority, bows prepared, spears honed. He reconnoiters at daybreak, scrutinizing ridgelines, assessing Custer's dust cloud. They approach unwarily. He communicates to a subordinate, voice subdued. He's prepared swift, silent, deadly. These figures don't merely converge, they collide forcefully. Gibbon is delayed. Sheridan is unyielding. Crook is careless. Custer is imprudent. Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse remain steadfast. They establish their defense. The army anticipates disorder, anticipating tribes to disintegrate. Conversely, they encounter a bludgeon fashioned, directed, descending. The fuse sputters more intensely. Dust billows above the Little Bighorn terrain in June 1876, generated by numerous hooves impacting the arid soil. The U.S. Army devises a scheme to constrict the Lakota and Cheyenne, a three-way pincer intended to subjugate them completely. General Alfred Terry departs from Fort Lincoln on May 17, leading 600 soldiers westward over the Dakota Territory. His conveyances trundle, axles groaning beneath loads of ammunition and preserved meat, while turbid water splashes in flasks. He disseminates a chart in his quarters, illumination flickering, and stabs a digit at the Yellowstone River, snarling to his assistant. Gibbon joins us here. We encircle them. John Gibbon is already progressing, guiding 400 troops eastward from Fort Ellis in Montana. Footwear abrading against stony crevices along the Yellowstone's periphery. The river surges vigorously, overpowering the clinking of blades against canteens. George Crook is assigned to advance northward from Wyoming with 800 personnel, still recovering from his March blunder. The tactic depends on all three uniting concurrently: Terry from the east, Gibbon from the west, Crook from the south, compelling the tribes into an inescapable predicament. The landscape resists, however, a region of precipitous inclines, dense vegetation, and waterways incising profound channels through the grasslands. It's challenging territory, concealing sound and visibility. Intercommunication disintegrates rapidly. Terry's reconnaissance units venture forth, leather chafing, but their dispatches fail to arrive at Gibbon messengers, disappear in the vastness, consumed by gales and expanse. Gibbon's forces advance laboriously, attire saturated with perspiration and grime, lacking any indication of Crook's whereabouts. Crook is recuperating from June 17, when 700 warriors under Crazy Horse overwhelmed his formation at Rosebud Creek. Firearms discharged. Equins shrieked, and his troopers retreated, abandoning 10 deceased on the ground. He crouches beside a chilled fire that night, whispering to his adjutant. Terry doesn't require this knowledge. Maintain confidentiality. No dispatch, no emissary, merely quiet. Terry rubs his facial hair in exasperation, snapping to his officers. Crook's vanished. Where's his unit? The division extends beyond mere organization. Terry, a Yale-trained attorney turned military leader, loathes Crook's Wild West bravado. Crook, marked by Apache conflicts, views Terry as a headquarters-bound bureaucrat. Correspondence from 75 reveals it. Terry previously described Crook as imprudent. Crook retorted by designating Terry cowardly. Presently, they're not communicating, not collaborating, stranding 1,800 soldiers, divided and disoriented. Crook's Rosebud failure remains concealed. Thus Terry and Gibbon proceed, approximating 800 adversaries when the genuine number is threefold that. George Armstrong Custer separates from Terry's unit on June 22, spurs shimmering as he boards his chestnut steed. He's leading 600 members of the 7th Cavalry, and time is pressing. The November 8 election approaches. His finances are devastated by unsuccessful railway ventures, and he requires a triumph to elevate his status. He trims his fair locks in his shelter, blades rasping as strands descend to the earth, then dons a pale deerskin coat, tassels oscillating as he exits. It's an ensemble, daring and flamboyant, yearning for a depiction in Harper's Weekly. Terry arrives with Gatling weaponry, mechanized destruction, 600 projectiles per minute, presenting them at the fort's perimeter. Custer scoffs, striking a container, and retorts, "Those contraptions? They'll impede me. I travel swiftly." He's relying on velocity, not artillery, fixated on a rapid conquest. Scouts arrive that evening, expressions grave, detailing dust clouds, thousands in motion, not merely hundreds. Custer supports himself against a structure, grinning at Major Reno. They'll scatter upon sighting us. Primitives don't resist. No disputes, collaborate, he commands, scrutinizing each individual. He exercises his troops rigorously. June 23, who's impacting the training area, shouting, "We'll dissect them by midday." His arrogance is overwhelming. Admonitions are ignored. The fissures expand. Terry's staff quarrel in his quarters. Captain Weir ambles, snapping. Gibbons behind schedule. Crook's absent. What's the strategy? Terry strikes the surface with his hand, glassware vibrating, but he lacks a solution. Gibbons' unit is delayed at the Yellowstone, June 21. Anticipating Terry's non-existent signal, his subordinate complains. "We're exposed targets here." Crook is 100 miles southward, tending to casualties, his quietude a burden, hindering the entire operation. The Army's estimations are inaccurate. June 24. The Little Bighorn landscape swarms with 500 combatants, dwellings spanning 3 miles. Smoke dense, like precipitation. Terry's intelligence, uncorrected by Crook's account, estimates it at 100. The topography is perilous. Cliffs ascend 200 feet. Canyons meander tightly. Greasewood obstructs movement. The tribes possess intimate knowledge of it. They maneuver along elevated areas, disappearing into depressions. The 7th numbers are depleted. 200 of Custer's troops are novices, agricultural laborers from Ohio and Pennsylvania, barely 20 years of age, mishandling firearms with perspiring hands. A private releases his cleaning tool in the vegetation, murmuring curses, while a sergeant commands him back into formation. They fired at inanimate objects, not humans. The mechanism is deteriorating swiftly. Terry is tardy. Gibbon digresses. Crook broods. Custer advances hastily. June 24, detaching without any connection. His pale attire a beacon against the somber terrain. The Army is anticipating a vulnerable adversary, a prompt conclusion. The valley reverberates. Instead, battle cries echo off stone. Hoofbeats agitate the ground. The mechanism doesn't function. It collapses. Snow blankets the Wyoming Territory. December 1875, wind howls through barren branches. General Crook's frigid offensive commences. 700 soldiers traverse snow accumulations. Exhalations visible, intending to compel the Lakota and Cheyenne onto designated areas. Equines stumble on frozen surfaces, tails thrashing in the tempest, as Crook's forces encounter a Cheyenne encampment on Powder River. March 17, 1876. Blazes erupt shelters, disintegrate in a cascade of embers. Females escort children through the obscurity, but the Cheyenne remain resilient. They journey northward, footwear deteriorating, converging with Crazy Horse by April. His contingent expands 700 warriors currently, blades shimmering in the fire's glow. Sitting Bull's settlement enlarges as well. June approaches 1,500 structures arrayed along the Little Bighorn. Coverings taut. 3,500 fighters consuming dried meat, lubricating archery equipment. Crook rests against his saddle, following Powder River, expectorating into the breeze. The chill will eliminate them. Incorrect. His incursion proves counterproductive. Tribes don't diminish. They accumulate, a barrier the Army fails to perceive. Back at Fort Lincoln, May 1876, cigar fumes twist in the officers' quarters. The Army is complacent from prior massacres. Sand Creek 64, Washita 68 officers toasting, grinning as though triumph is assured. A major slams a record book closed, commanding his subordinates. Uncivilized, the entire group will subdue them effortlessly. It's doctrine here, documented in dispatches from Sheridan's office. Tribes are incapable of combat, incapable of reasoning, incapable of endurance. A scout arrives, June 18, attire encrusted with mud, stuttering concerning settlements 3 miles in breadth. The major sneers, falsehoods they're famished there, and displaces a seat with his foot. That arrogance disregards the crucial details. Terry's ammunition containers remain partially unfilled. Gibbon's equines hobble from insufficient sustenance. They've dominated previously, therefore they economize presently, unmindful of the battle cries intensifying on the breeze. Custer's shelter flaps at Fort Lincoln. June 12 documents dispersing investment remnants. Debts, $8,000 in arrears from railway failures. Election day is November 8, 5 months distant, and he's yearning for a platform. New York's prominent figures, applauding his identity. He ambles, footwear scraping the ground, murmuring to Libby, "A single route, and I'm triumphant returning by October." His tone resonates, eager, envisioning news headlines. Custer vanquishes Sioux. A success is his salvation capital from backers, ballots from nationalists. He propels his troops outward. June 20, 600 mounts creaking, shouting, "Advance, renown awaits." Terry's entreaty coordinate with Gibbon affects him minimally. He's pursuing distinction, not directives. His haste is a weapon, taking shortcuts to inflict damage. His decisions deteriorate rapidly. He dismissed Gatling guns previously now. June 25, he intensifies his error, dividing his 600 into smaller units. Reno's 140 detach southward. Bentine's 120 maneuver southwest. He retains 210, controlling the reins. Deerskin prominent. Reconnaissance is minimal. June 24 riders, mention thousands. Dwellings saturating the valley. He observes from an elevation. June 25, muttering, "Insignificant, I'll handle them personally," and advances. Lacking a chart, lacking hesitation. His rationale is a risk attack swiftly, triumph significantly, disregard the probabilities. Inexperienced soldiers follow him. Adolescents, 18, 19, footwear entangling in vegetation, murmuring imprecations as ammunition eludes their unstable grasp. He's relying on his reputation, not their courage. It accumulates negatively. Terry's wagons are bogged down 20 miles eastward. June 25 axles, protesting no messenger from Custer, no opportunity to converge. Gibbon's 400 trudge 30 miles westward, footwear absorbing mud, oblivious to the fragmentation. Crook is 100 miles southward, recuperating from rosebud injuries, maintaining silence. The valley is formidable escarpments. Ascend 200 feet, the waterway curves abruptly. Dust irritates vision. Sitting Bull remains by his fire. June 25 limb extended, tone resembling granite. They've arrived. Eliminate them. Crazy Horse leaps up, weapon shimmering. 800 riders dispersing. Hooves silent on compressed terrain. Custer's 210 surmount the prominence. Reno is hemorrhaging southward. Bentine is unmoored. The army's complacent acceleration disintegrates Sitting Bull's multitude. Crazy Horse's resolve. The landscape itself transformed Custer's advance into devastation. Hooves beat softly on the Dakota prairie. June 22, 1876, as the 7th Cavalry departs from Fort Lincoln. Elizabeth Libby Custer remains at the entrance, breeze disturbing her raven tresses, limbs encircling her spouse's neck. Tears moisten her cheeks, permeating his deerskin collar as she embraces firmly, her respiration interrupted by weeping. George Armstrong Custer disengages, boards his steed, and departs, 600 troops accompanying, sediment swirling. Libby persists stationary, a solitary form diminishing against the grasslands, head lowered, shoulders trembling. John Berkman, Custer's assistant, observes her becoming indistinct, murmuring to a fellow soldier. She's lamenting as though he's not returning. The heavens alter, clouds contort, capturing the procession's silhouette, an uncanny reflection above. Spouses of officers remain near the enclosure, hands manipulating wraps, gaze shifting toward the expanse. A lieutenant's wife whispers to a companion. It feels amiss, excessively tranquil. Apprehension diffuses through the military post. Although subsequent narratives might embellish it, retrospection intensifies apprehension. Custer's quarters emanate a subdued glow that evening. June 24, lantern illumination penetrating fabric near the rosebud. He stooped over a surface, pen scoring documents, correspondence, directives, memoranda, not the customary card game with tobacco fumes and boisterous laughter. His countenance constricts, mandible clenched, as he gazes upward at Major Marcus Reno traversing the soil. Attend if you possess notions. I'm receptive, he states, tone subdued, unwavering. Not the arrogant bluster Reno anticipates. It's disconcerting Custer, the ostentatious individual, soliciting contribution. Captain Frederick Benteen approaches subsequently, providing intelligence from scouts, and Custer acknowledges, quietly, rely on your instincts. Officers exchange looks. Lieutenant Godfrey records in his diary. He's altered, subdued, almost apprehensive. They've witnessed him disregard probabilities, celebrate with camaraderie. Currently, he's pensive, gaze flitting toward obscurities. Some speculate his fortune is waning. 36 years of ventures. Perhaps destiny is unfavorable. The night extends, June 24 into 25. Custer persisting pigment stains his digits. Documents accumulate. Charts crinkle beneath his grasp. No alcoholic beverages. No card games. Solely the grating of pen against parchment. Footwear scraping as he adjusts. He's preparing diligently, not engaging in leisure, the impending day's burden weighing upon him. Daybreak occurs, June 25, and he assembles his officers. Reno, Benteen, Captain Weir tone, resolute but unfamiliar. No disputes, collaborate, he commands, scrutinizing each individual. It deviates from his customary approach. Ordinarily, he'd swagger, bellow, command independently. The 7th divisions are profound. Reno is morose. Benteen is resentful from prior offenses, and Custer is cognizant of it. His circumspection is unsettling, resembling an individual peering over a precipice. Foreboding permeates. Libby's communication reaches him that morning. June 25, ink blurred from her grasp. I yearn for you. George, remain secure, she implores. Expressions quivering on the sheet. She's 200 miles distant, traversing Fort Lincoln, viscera agitated. Custer deposits it in his attire, ascends his mount, deerskin capturing the sunlight. The procession proceeds, firearms clink, restraints snap, unseasoned recruits falter in the brush. The valley awaits, escarpments towering, waterway glistening. Warriors observe from an elevated vantage point, weapons poised. 3 days remain, and the atmosphere resembles a suspended respiration. This confluence of premonitions and disquiet solidifies a spouse's weeping, a leader's uncertainty, a serene encampment preceding a cataclysm. Custer's facade diminishes, sufficiently to induce trepidation. The Little Bighorn's mechanism is prepared, and it's constricting. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories. Remain for the ensuing events.